In 1691, Sor Juana Ines de la Cruz, Mexican nun and poet, wrote what is considered to be the first feminist manifesto. After being criticized for her studies by the church, Sor Juana wrote a letter in which she defended the right of women to learn. By doing so, she took a stand against the oppressive expectations set for women during that time. This not only proved to women in society that women could be educated and successful, but it also allowed future feminists to have a defense and reason to be allowed the same education as men, and promoted the further fight for equality between genders. In order to understand Sor Juana's story, one must look back to the late 15th to 16th century, to what is today known as Mexico. During that time, Spain's claim of the area there and the conquest of indigenous civilizations set the stage for an extended period of tumult and clashing worldviews. This eventually evolved into a society of caste systems, with a strong focus on maintaining Spanish rule and supremacy. These caste systems determined how far in life an individual could go, based on race. During Sor Juana's time, she witnessed native-born Spaniards exploit the land and native peoples of her home. Many of her writings reflect on the injustices she witnessed towards people of a certain race, gender, or social class. Her experiences with both the rural and metropolitan areas of her homeland allowed her to broaden her worldview and enhance her perspective. Growing up in the countryside and then later in life being at court provided Sor Juana with the experiences and mindset to view the world openly. Sor Juana was born circa 1650 as Juana Inés de Aspaje y Ramírez de Santillana in San Miguel Nepantla, Tepetlispa, Mexico. She was raised on the haciendas, or plantations, of her family, born as an illegitimate child to a Spanish father and a Creole mother. From a very young age, she displayed a hunger for knowledge and a passion for learning, and proved to be a prodigy. It is said that she read her way through her grandfather's library at a very young age, and that she learned Latin by the age of 4. She was also said to have mastered Greek logic by adolescence. In 1662, Juana entered the court of the Marquis of Mancera. She was a favorite at court for her impressive intellect. 1669, Juana became a nun at the convent of St. Jerome, which would allow her to continue her studies and not get married. This is one of her earlier acts of defiance towards the expectations set for women at that time. Sor Juana was a successful and revered writer, thanks to her mastery of numerous writing styles. She wrote many pieces that questioned society at the time, and firmly believed that women had the capacity to compete with men. One of her most famous pieces, Primero Sueño, or First Dream, delves into the human soul's desire to know and understand the world. It is both personal and universal for Sor Juana, as it puts some of her intense yearning for knowledge and understanding into words. It is a display of her great mind and writing. In another poem by Sor Juana, titled Hombres Necios, or Foolish Men, Sor Juana highlights the absurdity of men criticizing women. Sor Juana and her writings were acknowledged as a great danger to the Church. Her criticism of their belief that women should not pursue education and intellectual studies was perceived as a threat. Thus, in 1691, the Bishop of Puebla, Manuel Fernandez de Santa Cruz, published one of Sor Juana's criticisms of a famous Jesuit sermon without her consent. Alongside the criticisms, the bishop published a letter shaming her for her comments and for her writing. The criticism was published under the pseudonym Sor Filotea de la Cruz. This prompted Sor Juana to write the famous Respuesta a Sor Filotea de la Cruz, or the response to the Sister Filotea de la Cruz, which is a letter to Sor Filotea in response to the publication. In this letter, Sor Juana defends herself and the right of all women to learn and be educated. She highlights the necessity of knowledge even as a nun, so as to understand scripture. She also speaks of famous women that were all well educated and intelligent. Alongside that, she cleverly defends her thirst for learning. The Respuesta is therefore considered to be the first public feminist manifesto, as it openly and fearlessly claims that women should have the right to learn and be on the same intellectual level as men, regardless of what roles and expectations society placed on them. Quoting the Respuesta, "One can perfectly well philosophize while cooking supper." By writing the Respuesta, Sor Juana was taking a stand against the church and its expectations set for women, and taking a stand against the mindset that women were intellectually inferior to men and therefore did not have the right to education. She stood up against those who wished to silence her purely because she was an educated woman. This was a bold and brave move according to society at that time. This was a time where women were expected to submit to men and to live under them. They were not allowed professional schooling and were constantly being taken advantage of by men. It was a widespread belief that women were mentally and physically inferior to men. Sor Juana, a person of undisputed success and intelligence, took on these confining expectations and shattered them. After years of study and writing, she became the first published woman in the New World to speak out against the oppression of women by society, and also spoke out publicly, fighting for women. She provided a solid defense for her passion for learning, opposing society's belief at that time that women should not be allowed to pursue education. Even after the church managed to silence Sor Juana and tried to erase her from history, she was remembered as a great and influential writer, and her works were not forgotten. Even now, Sor Juana inspires many feminists, serving as a role model and inspiration. By bravely taking a stand against society, Sor Juana proved that women could be intelligent, could learn, and that they had the right to stand up to men. Sor Juana Ines de la Cruz grew up in a country divided by prejudice and oppression. She was able to see firsthand the injustices occurring at that time against people based on their race and gender. These experiences shaped her unique worldview and helped cement her belief that women had the ability to compete with men and should be allowed to learn. Sor Juana was known as a prodigy and a genius writer. When she was attacked and criticized by the church for her work, she courageously spoke out about her beliefs when it came to learning in her letter, the Respuesta. In it, Sor Juana defended not only her, but all women's right to learn and study, and stood up against society's belief that women were inferior to men, especially intellectually. This was a huge leap for feminism at the time, and is known as the first feminist manifesto. Sor Juana's words and actions brought new ideas and questions to society at that time, and serves as an inspiration and role model in the battle for gender equality. Sor Juana has been remembered and honored in Mexico as a great and influential writer and historical figure. In April 1995, Sor Juana's name was inscribed in gold on the Wall of Honor in the Mexican Congress. She appears on the obverse of the Banco de Mexico's 200 peso bill, and the convent at which she spent 27 years of her life and wrote most of her works at is today known as the University of the Cloister of Sor Juana and is located in Mexico City. Besides that, there are many statues and museums remembering this woman's life and legacy. Feminism is still a large movement today, advocating for the rights of women and fighting for equality between genders. Though there are still bumps along the road, rights for women could never have come this far as they have had it not been for figures in history like Sor Juana Ines de la Cruz.